Mangwana ni mwalelepo vukenjani class vanave Africa. Welcome to Africa. Good morning. The news and current affairs show bringing you everything you need to know happening on the African continent and beyond. You know, just before the camera went on, we were talking about how you know when you love someone. And I think one of those things is when you look forward to seeing them. And we certainly look forward to seeing you, our viewers, as we go through the broadcast. How are you, Glenora?
I'm doing very well. I'm doing very well.
Fantastic.
Thank you for bringing us in.
No, it's what we
with
do.
so much love. With so much love. With so much love. You're looking very good.
I do what I can to match
very
your
handsome,
energy.
very
Just
dapper. Are
matching
you
your
going to
energy.
the gym?
I mean, yes, that is necessary, but I don't know what that has to do with the suit.
Well, on today's Africa Good Morning, Nigerian students escaped abductors 2 weeks after kidnapping. 12 held after Beijing hospital fire kills 29. Zimbabwe president promises free and fair election. We'll get into these stories and more right after the break.
Heading into the top stories, 8 Nigerian secondary school students kidnapped by gunmen in northern Kaduna State 2 weeks ago escaped from their captors and were found by villagers who alerted security forces on Tuesday, the state's Internal Security Commissioner said. Armed gangs operating mostly in remote parts of northwest Nigeria have carried out violent attacks against villages, schools and motorists, abducting hundreds for ransom. The female students were seized by an armed gang on their way from school along with an unknown number of others, authorities said on April 4.
12 people have been detained by police for questioning after a hospital fire in Beijing killed at least 29, most of them patients. The fire, among the deadliest in recent years, broke out in Shangfeng Hospital at about 1 p.m. local time on Tuesday. Angry and concerned relatives rushed to the hospital hours later, only learning of the fire from local news reports. 7 or 8 hours have passed and I didn't even receive a call, one relative told China Youth Daily. Many said they spent the night trying to locate loved ones. Those who were rescued have now been shifted to other hospitals for treatment. Speaking at a press conference on Wednesday, officials said a preliminary investigation showed that sparks generated during renovation works had ignited paint stored on site. Among those detained are the director and deputy director of the hospital, as well as the head of the firm overseeing the renovation works. Footage on social media showed patients jumping out of windows to flee as dense smoke billowed out of the building.
Now, Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa on Tuesday vowed that general elections expected later this year would be free and fair. Now, he issued a warning to rogue civic society organizations during this Independence Day speech. The Southern African country is due to hold presidential and legislative votes expected to be in August, but no date has been announced yet. The 80-year-old leader, who is seeking re-election, urged Zimbabweans to say no to violence before, during and after the upcoming crunch vote. My government has put measures in place to ensure free, fair and credible elections, he said in a speech delivered at the event to mark 43 years of independence from Britain. Now, 2 days after the 2018 polls, soldiers killed 5 people when opposition protesters alleging fraud took to the streets of Harare, burning tires and pulling down street signs. Mnangagwa warned of voices, foreign or local, inclusive of rogue NGOs sowing seeds of division and disharmony among Zimbabweans. In early February, the country's parliament approved a bill banning civil society organizations from engaging in politics. Under the new legislature, the state can intervene in the governance and activities of charities and civil groups, including making changes to their internal management and funding.
EU chief urges leaders not to let China divide bloc. EU chief Ursula von der Leyen urged the bloc's leaders to show unity in the face of China on Tuesday, 1 week after French President Emmanuel Macron stirred a fierce debate over ties with Beijing. Macron triggered a firestorm following a trip to China by asserting that Europe should not automatically follow U.S. policy on Taiwan and should avoid crises that aren't ours. A strong European-China policy relies on strong coordination between member states and EU institutions and on the willingness to avoid divide-and-conquer tactics. Von der Leyen, who accompanied Macron to Beijing, told MEPs, We have already in the recent days and weeks seen those tactics in action, and it is now time for Europe to move to action too. Now is the time to demonstrate our collective will, she said in an address to the European Parliament. Von der Leyen reiterated her call for the 27-nation EU to reduce its dependence on an increasingly assertive Beijing for key resources while not fully decoupling its economy from China and its vast markets.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said the country has finished building its first military spy satellite and gave the green light for its launch. And this is according to state media on Wednesday. The report of its completion comes about a week after Pyongyang launched what it said was a new solid-fuel intercontinental ballistic missile, marking a major breakthrough in its banned weapons programs. Analysts have said there is significant technological overlap between the development of ICBMs and space launch capabilities. Kim gave instructions on Tuesday to make sure that the military reconnaissance satellite number 1, completed as of April, will be launched at the planned date, the official Korean Central News Agency reported. During a visit to North Korea's National Aerospace Development Administration on Tuesday, he also called on staff to firmly establish the satellite intelligence gathering capability by deploying several reconnaissance satellites on different orbits in succession. Now, in December 2022, North Korea said it had carried out an important final stage test for the development of a spy satellite, which it said would be complete by April this year. At the time, experts in South Korea quickly raised doubts about the results, saying the quality of the black and white images released by North Korea, purportedly taken from a satellite, was poor.
Wrapping up our top stories, Dar es Salaam ranked 85th richest city globally and the 12th in Africa. Dar es Salaam has been ranked as the 85th wealthiest city in the world and 12th in Africa, boosted by growth in the number of high net worth individuals by 20% in the last decade. The world's wealthiest cities 2023 reported by consultancy New World Wealth and Henley Partners placed Tanzania's commercial capital city among the top cities globally with the fastest growing numbers of dollar millionaires. The latest report, which tracks private wealth migration trends worldwide, shows Dar es Salaam has 1,400 highly wealthy individuals with at least $1 million in net worth and 4 centimillionaires, people with a net worth of over $100 million, and 1 individual who is a dollar billionaire. The report, which features exclusive data highlighting 97 of the world's wealthiest and fastest growing cities with the most millionaires, centimillionaires, and billionaires, and accompanied by global and real estate insights from leading academic and industry experts. In Africa, Dar es Salaam fell out of the top 10 and is ranked 12th behind other cities such as Luanda, Accra, Pretoria, Cape Town, Casablanca, Nairobi, Cairo, Johannesburg, Durban, Cape Winelands, and Garden Route. South Africa and Egypt had the most cities in Africa in the ranking, led by Johannesburg, which has $14,600 millionaires, the most in Africa. However, this was a decline from the 15,200 millionaires reported in the 2022 report.
Wow, big numbers. You know, the only time I've ever seen your throat get dry is when you're talking about money.
I know. I think I should move to either.
I knew you were going to say that. You might consider moving, but we're not going anywhere. More Africa. Good morning after the break.
To another exciting episode of Oneuptwo. Hier is die weer en vertel ook vir julle waar die vis julle monster kan byt.
Now, even though it's no longer making the daily headlines, COVID-19 is still very much amongst us. We'll be looking at some of the developments and how people are living with the condition with WHO's Science in 5.
We are entering the 4th year of the pandemic. What do we know so far about Omicron? Are there settings where people are more at risk? And what does the future look like? Hello and welcome to Science in 5. I'm Vismita Gupta-Smith. We are talking to Dr. Maria Van Kerkhove today. Welcome, Maria. Maria, let's start with, what do we know so far about Omicron?
Hi, Vismita. Thanks for having me back on Science in 5. Omicron is the latest variant of concern that has been in circulation around the globe for more than a year now. The virus continues to evolve, and Omicron continues to evolve. There are more than 500 sublineages of Omicron that are currently in circulation. Most of these are the BA.5 sublineages, and we have a global group of individuals around the world that are helping us to track this virus. What we look at is transmissibility, and all of the Omicron sublineages are more transmissible than the next. This is what these viruses do. They need to infect individuals. But we also look at severity. And what we do know about Omicron in terms of its severity is that there's a similar level of severity of all of these sublineages. On average, Omicron was less severe than Delta, but Omicron causes the full spectrum of disease, everything from asymptomatic infection or reinfection, as well as severe disease and death. So it's really critical that we do all we can to prevent those deaths from occurring. And we're also looking at the impact of our interventions, our diagnostics, our therapeutics, and our vaccines. And they're holding up very well in terms of our ability to detect this virus around the world. And our vaccines are working incredibly well at preventing severe disease and death. But it is absolutely critical that surveillance is maintained around the world so that we can track the known sublineages and be able to detect any new variants of concern that may arise, because there still is a risk for further variants of concern to emerge.
Maria, as governments and individuals seem to be dropping precautionary measures, tell us about settings where people may be more at risk and what we can do to protect ourselves.
So this is a really critical time right now. As you said, we've entered the 4th year of this pandemic, and people are tired of talking about COVID and dealing with this. But I think what's really important to remember is that there's so much that we can do to reduce the spread, not stop the spread, but reduce it and also save lives right now. It's about the fundamentals. There are riskier locations than others. Indoor is riskier than outdoors. Crowded settings are riskier than less crowded settings, for example. But what we need to be able to do is use the tools that exist while we live our lives. Putting on a mask when you're indoors, when you're around others, is a rational thing to do. And it's available now because masks are widely available. Making sure that governments invest in ventilation where we live, where we work, where we study. This remains fundamental for respiratory diseases and will help improve and reduce transmission around the world. One of the critical things that you can do as an individual is get vaccinated. When we think about vaccination, we have to also consider that 30% of the world has not yet received a single dose. And in every country, we are missing really key individuals. We have not reached the targets of vaccination of 70% in every country. At the present time, each week between 8,000 and 10,000 people are dying from COVID-19, and a lot of these are preventable.
Maria, paint us a picture of what the future looks like. What does it mean when we say living with COVID-19?
COVID-19 is here with us to stay. And what we hope is in 2023 that we can end the emergency everywhere. We are in a much better position to do that because we know so much more about this virus. Although we don't know everything and we remain humble to learning about this, we have so many tools that can reduce the spread and can save lives now. You as an individual have a role to play, knowing what your risk is where you live and taking measures while you live your life to reduce your exposure to the virus. Making sure that you get vaccinated and receive those full doses can prevent you from getting severe disease and dying. We have to remember that we're entering the 4th year of this pandemic, and COVID-19 is one of the many challenges that we face. We face other infectious hazards like influenza and RSV and other circulating pathogens, but there are many other crises that we are dealing with climate change and floods, droughts, war. And so we have to live with COVID responsibly and manage this disease in the context of everything else. We at WHO are working very hard with all member states to integrate COVID into strengthened surveillance systems, into strengthened disease control programs, so that they're not standalone programs, but that they are dealt with within strengthened health systems. Remember, we're all fragile after 4 years of this, entering our 4th year of this. And it's important that we be kind to one another, we listen to one another, we help each other through this, because we can end this emergency everywhere in 2023.
Thank you, Maria. That was Science in 5 today. Until next time, then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stick with science.
Let's take a look at the weather predictions for Southern Africa before we get into your economic news.
Heading into economic news, the East African Community Secretariat has commenced the process of digitizing its common external tariffs. The program, being implemented with the support of the World Customs Organization, is geared to enhance the private sector's participation in international trade. Through the digitization of CETs, the business community, exporters and importers will have access to trade information from the private sector in international trade. The platform, which is currently under development in partnership with Global Trade Solution, will enable seamless migration of the EAC CET during the transposition of the harmonized system.
Namibia breaks from SA with smaller hikes, its interest rate now 50 basis points lower. The Bank of Namibia deviated from South African monetary policy for the first time this year, raising borrowing costs by a quarter percentage point over concerns that a bigger increase would constrict demand and crimp economic growth. The Monetary Policy Committee lifted the repurchase rate to 7.25% from 7%. The hike was less than the South African Reserve Bank's 50 basis points increase last month.
All right, that brings us to the end of our economic news stories. We're going to get into the indicators shortly, but yesterday Bayern Munich and Manchester City drew 1-1, and Ari Hochard will follow through with more international sport.
Good day, everyone. Time for international sports news, and starting off with tennis news. It's still the clay court season in the men's ATP that continues. Barcelona Open that continued in the round of 64. It was number one seed, Carlos Alcaraz. He was on court his first game in the tournament. He beat Nuno Borges quite comfortably 6-3 and 6-1. Also number 3 seed, that is Casper Ruud of Norway, safely through, beat Bruce Sheldon of the USA by 6-2 and 7-6 to advance to the round of 32. And then also number 5 seed, Tiafoe, that is Francis Tiafoe of the USA, beating Emil Risevuro. He is from Finland. He had to come back from a set down. It scored 4-6, 7-6 and 6-4. Tiafoe also through to the round of 32. Also safely through some of the higher seeds to the round of 32 is number 2 seed Stefanos Tsitsipas, and also number 4 seed that is Jannik Sinner. And Jannik Sinner's got a tough game in the round of 32. He will play against Diego Schwartzman of Argentina. He's a clay court specialist. Also continuing with cricket news, and it is the IPL that continued, the Indian Premier League, game 25 of 70, and it was the Mumbai Indians that beat the Sunrisers by 14 runs. Mumbai Indians 192 for the loss of 5, and then that's in their lot of 20 overs, and then 178 all out for the Sunrisers. Quite a few South Africans playing in the Sunrisers team. It is Aiden Markram, he scored 22, then also Heinrich Claessens with 36, and Marco Jansen also playing in that team. News from Australia is leading up to the Ashes series that starts in a few months' time. That is much anticipated. Australia playing against England. 5 test matches will be played in England. And it is news from Australia is that David Warner, he's actually out of form at the moment cricket-wise, but he's been included in a 17-man squad for the first 2 tests. The first test of the 5 will be played at Espeston, and that will be on the 16th of June. Continuing international sports news with soccer news, UEFA Championship, but that continues. The best soccer teams in Europe are battling out in the quarter-finals. It was Real Madrid that beat Chelsea. They played at home. They beat them by 2-0, and the aggregate score is now 4-0. It was Chelsea that actually challenged quite well in the first half. It was 0-all after the first half, but Chelsea actually played all the football. Unlucky not to have scored, but then it was Real Madrid in the second half pulling away. They through to the semi-finals. Also another game, it was AC Milan, also through to the semi-finals. They drew 1-1 with Napoli, aggregate win there by 2-1. Good enough for AC Milan to be through to the semi-finals, and AC Milan, a threat in the knockout games. They are a 7-time champion of the Champions League. Closing off today's international sports news with rugby news. This coming weekend, it is the final round-robin games of the United Rugby Championship, where South African teams compete with teams from Europe. And big news from the Sharks game against Munster is that the Irish team Munster announced that the influential lock from South Africa, the Springbok Argeir Snyman, he won't be able to play because of a concussion threat on Saturday. That's a pity. Also, the Sharks without Eben Etzebeth, would have been nice to have those 2 big locks play against each other, Eben Etzebeth and Argeir Snyman. Not going to happen, but it's Argeir Snyman that will be back for the playoff rounds. The Sharks play against Munster on Saturday. Friday, it's the Stormers that play in Stellenbosch against Benetton. And then also on Saturday, it is the Bulls that face Leinster. That's international sports news for today. Hope you have a great sport day, and we talk again tomorrow. Goodbye.
Welcome to What's Cooking, where culinary passion meets expert insights.
Somebody must really want to cook and want to cook good food.
Immerse yourself in the bustling world of professional kitchens as top chefs create mouthwatering dishes. Join us for in-depth interviews as our host explores the experiences and expertise of our guest chefs. Don't miss out. Tune in to What's Cooking on NTV every Friday at 2100 hours and let the culinary adventure begin.
Thank you for being with Africa Good Morning throughout this morning's broadcast. Let's have a look at the highlights. Nigerian students escape abductors 2 weeks after kidnapping. 12 held after Beijing hospital fire kills 29. Zimbabwe president promises free and fair election. EAC to digitize tariffs for imported goods. Those have been our stories.
And with that, we've come to the end of our broadcast. Do remember that Africa Good Morning is repeated on our Oneuptwo website, our DSTV channel 285 and GoTV channel 25 between 8:30 and 9 a.m. every weekday. I am Glenn Rashipura.
And I am Ashwin Berry.